An old man walks into a convenience store for nothing more than a bottle of water. 3 reckless young men follow him inside. Moments later, they shove him into a corner and press a gun to his ribs, mocking him, threatening him, certain he is weak. But the old man they cornered is no ordinary stranger. He is a Marine whose name once carried the weight of thunder across distant battlefields. And when these men learn who he truly is, fear changes sides. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Wherever you are, I'm grateful you're here. And if stories of silent heroes, unseen sacrifices, and powerful moral justice resonate with you, please subscribe so you never miss a new story. The gun touched his ribs before the old man even realized the door had fully closed behind him. Cold metal, sharp and unfriendly, nudged just beneath the line of his coat. The 3 young men who surrounded him smelled of sweat, cheap adrenaline, and the kind of bravado that only ever holds strength when aimed at the innocent. Move. The tallest one hissed. It was the first word spoken in a moment that felt far too quiet for danger. The convenience store was nearly empty, only the night cashier half asleep at the counter, unaware, and a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed with the disinterest of an uncaring world. Outside, the parking lot was washed in the pale glow of distant street lamps, stretching shadows like long fingers over cracked pavement. The old man did not lift his hands. He did not tremble. He simply looked forward, eyes steady, as if he had been nudged by something far less threatening than a gun. He was small in stature, slightly hunched, dressed in a soft brown coat with frayed cuffs that had clearly been repaired more than once. His boots were old, his shoulders tired, his breathing slow and measured. Nothing about him screamed danger. Nothing about him suggested he had lived a life that once made the fiercest soldiers lower their voices in respect. Yet the moment the metal pressed deeper into his side, something ancient, something long buried, stirred beneath his quiet eyes. The young men didn't notice. People rarely noticed anything quiet anymore. Only minutes earlier, he had walked into the store with the slow, deliberate steps of someone who no longer rushed anywhere. His name was Thomas Hale, though few knew that name anymore. To the world he looked like a widower in his late 70s. The kind of man who paused when he walked by a photo booth, because he no longer recognized the person staring back. He carried the weight of loss in the curve of his spine, and the weight of memory in the stillness of his gaze. But the young men didn't see that. Predators never see the soul of the prey they choose. And so now, with the gun pushing deeper and a hand gripping his shoulder, Thomas stood still as a stone. His silence made the tallest one frown. "Did you hear me, old man?" The old man heard everything, not just the threat, but the tremor beneath it. He heard fear inside the gunman's voice, masked beneath cruelty. He heard a boy pretending to be a monster because he feared becoming invisible. Thomas knew that fear. He had seen it on battlefields, in tunnels, in the reflection of his own eyes decades earlier. But he said nothing, and that silence enraged the young man. Thomas Hale once believed silence was where strength lived. Tonight, it would save his life and theirs. Inside the store, the air carried the faint smell of burnt coffee and old cleaning solution. A television above the counter muttered through a late night talk show. The cashier, a teenager too exhausted to notice danger, even if it stood inches from him, scrolled through his phone. Life moved on as if nothing wrong was happening. That was the way most injustice survived. In the quiet corners where the world looked away, the boy with the gun lowered his voice to a whisper that tried to mimic authority. "Give me your wallet." Now, Thomas still did not raise his hands. The second boy, shorter with nervous eyes that darted around the store, swallowed hard. He stood slightly behind the gunman, fingers tapping against his leg. "Man, hurry up," he muttered. "This old dude's taking too long." The third leaned against a shelf, pretending disinterest but unable to tear his gaze away. His jaw clenched every few seconds, the way someone does when guilt is chewing through their courage. They weren't killers. Not yet. They were cowards with a weapon, balancing on the edge of a mistake that could ruin every life in this room. Thomas finally lifted his gaze to the boy holding the gun. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and soft, like gravel rolling under calm water. "You don't want to do this." The tall one smirked. "Yeah, why's that?" Thomas inhaled slowly, the breath steadying him, grounding him, reminding him of everything he had ever learned about staying alive. "Because the moment you choose violence," he said, It stops belonging to you. The boy pressed the gun harder. Stop talking like you're somebody. The old man's eyes didn't blink. Son, he said simply, I was somebody long before you were born. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't pride. It was a fact spoken the way some men speak of the weather. The second boy scoffed, trying to regain some control. Why we wasting time? Take his wallet, bro. He's just an old man. Thomas's silence deepened. Not fearful. Not submissive. Unshaken. The tall boy grabbed the old man's coat, forcing him against a shelf. Items clattered around them. A row of canned soup trembled and fell to the ground. It was only then that the cashier looked up, eyes widening, but he froze in uncertainty. Fear kept everyone still, except Thomas. Beneath his coat, a small emblem glinted, just for a second, as the fabric shifted. It was a worn pin, barely visible, but unmistakable, an eagle perched atop a globe and anchor. The symbol of the United States Marine Corps. The gunman didn't see it. But the third boy, quiet, tense, watching everything, did. His breath stopped. He stepped forward. Hey guys! The tall one snapped. What? The third boy swallowed. Look, his pin. That's a Marine pin. That's real. That's old. The gunman rolled his eyes. It's some army surplus junk. No. The third whispered. It's not. Thomas finally turned his head slightly toward the boy who had recognized it. Their eyes met. The boy's voice dropped to something almost reverent. I think that's the real deal. The leader scoffed but shifted, just a little. So what? He fought in some old war. That's supposed to scare me. Thomas exhaled slowly. His gaze drifted, not to the gun, not to the threat, but to a space far beyond the walls of the quiet little store. Some memory that flickered silently behind his expression. He had once been feared. Feared not because he was cruel, but because he was unbreakable. His name had lived in the whispered corners of barracks and briefing rooms. He had endured battles so fierce that legends refused to fade. He had survived ambushes, storms, betrayals, and the kind of violence that stains a soul for life. Yet he had returned home quietly, slipping into civilian life like a ghost who preferred shadows over glory. Medals collected dust in a box beneath his bed. Photographs of his unit, men who had become brothers, were tucked inside an old album, untouched since the funeral of his closest friend. He had lived long enough to see a world grow loud with noise and short on memory. Long enough to know that the most dangerous thing in any room was not the gun, but the person who had already survived worse. Thomas looked back at the gunman. I'm asking you, he said, not to make me remember things I've spent 30 years trying to forget. The tall boy's smirk finally faltered, and for the first time, uncertainty crept into his voice. What does that mean? Thomas didn't answer. He didn't need to. Silence, in the right hands, is a weapon sharper than any blade. Thomas Hale had enlisted at 19, back when the country was sending young men to distant jungles and foreign deserts without fully understanding the ghosts they would bring home. He had learned early how the world could turn from beauty to brutality in a single breath. He had learned how to crawl through mud thick with the scent of earth and blood. He had watched friends take their last breaths beneath broken skies. He had been promoted quickly. Too quickly, he had always thought. Promotions earned through survival often felt like punishments. His squad called him Iron Hale, not because he was ruthless, but because something inside him never bent. Even when injured, even when exhausted, even when trapped behind enemy lines for 3 days with nothing but willpower and a knife. But the moment that haunted him most had nothing to do with gunfire. It was the sound of a friend's voice, his closest brother in arms, whispering, "Get them home, Tommy," just before he died. Thomas had spent the next year fulfilling that promise, getting every member of his unit back alive. He had carried their weight, their fear, their hope, across miles of unforgiving terrain. He had earned medals, commendations, and the fear-tinged respect of generals. But when he returned home, the world had moved on. He became just another old man walking slowly through grocery aisles, unseen and unremarkable. Tonight, however, fate had decided he would not remain invisible. Not anymore. Back in the store, tension thickened. The gunman's swagger crumbled under the weight of something he didn't understand. Thomas saw the fear blooming behind the boy's eyes. The fear of being seen for what he truly was, a frightened kid trying to outrun his own emptiness. The old man's voice softened, though his posture remained unshaken. "You boys still have a choice," Thomas said. "A life can change with one decision, for better or for worse." The boy holding the gun forced a laugh that cracked halfway through. "We're not scared of some retired grunt." Thomas lifted his chin slightly. "I never retired." That made the boy step back, just a hair. "You're lying." But Thomas didn't blink. The third boy, the quiet one, stepped closer. "Dude, there used to be stories. Marines talked about a guy named Hale. Said he was like a ghost. Like he wouldn't go down. Like he." The tall boy snapped, "Shut up. You think this old guy is some legend?" Thomas's eyes returned to the gun. And then he said something so calm, so utterly steady, it chilled the air itself. "Son, put the gun down before you meet the man your friends used to fear." The words landed with the weight of a distant battlefield. Not loud. Not aggressive. But final. The gun wavered. The cashier finally noticed what was happening. His eyes widened, but fear rooted him to the spot. Thomas inhaled, grounding himself. Steady as a mountain, he raised one hand, not in surrender, but in a slow, deliberate gesture of peace. "You don't want this," he said. "You think you do. But you don't." The short boy to the right began to tremble. "Let's go, man. This isn't worth it." But the leader couldn't give up control so easily. His pride had been wounded. And wounded pride is the most unpredictable thing in the world. He pressed the gun back into Thomas's ribs. "You think I'm scared of you?" Thomas's silence stretched until it felt suffocating. Finally, he whispered, "You should be scared of the man you'll become if you pull that trigger." For a moment, no one breathed. The tall boy's hand shook. Then, the door opened. A breeze swept in, and with it, a presence so heavy, so unmistakably powerful, it shifted the entire atmosphere of the store. A woman in military fatigues stepped inside, her posture rigid, her eyes sharp. She froze the moment she saw the gun. She recognized Thomas instantly. Her lips parted in disbelief. "Sir," the gunman whipped around. "Back off!" But the woman didn't back off. She took one step inside, then another, her hand near her holster. "Thomas Hale," she said softly, almost reverently. The three boys exchanged confused glances. The tall one whispered, "You actually know him?" The woman swallowed, her voice thick with awe. "Everyone knows him." The gunman blinked. "What?" Is not just anything," she said. "This man is why half the people in my unit came home alive. He's the Marine they told stories about in training. The one they said kept going even when he shouldn't have been breathing." The tall boy's grip faltered. The woman stepped closer. Her voice lowered, respectful, steady. "Sir, if you give me permission." Thomas shook his head. "No," he said. "Let them choose." The leader turned back to him, chest heaving. You're really him." Thomas nodded once. The tall boy looked at the gun in his hand, then at the old man before him. A man who radiated an unshakable calm, a man who made the world seem suddenly too small. His voice cracked. "I didn't know." Thomas whispered, "You never know who you're pointing a gun at." The boy's eyes filled with something raw. Fear, shame, realization. Slowly, his hand lowered. The gun slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the floor. The shortest boy backed away, hands trembling. The third boy bowed his head, unable to meet Thomas's gaze. The leader stepped back, eyes blinking hard, as if trying to wake from a nightmare, or perhaps awaken from the version of himself he hated. Thomas exhaled softly. The woman in uniform moved forward, securing the weapon. But Thomas raised his hand gently, stopping her from drawing cuffs. "Let them walk away," Thomas murmured. "Walk away changed." The leader swallowed hard. "We're sorry." Thomas nodded. "Make it mean something." The three boys fled the store, shame clinging to their steps more heavily than fear. Only when they vanished into the night did the cashier finally exhale. The woman turned to Thomas. "Sir, are you okay?" Thomas smiled faintly. The kind of smile that carried the weight of a lifetime. "I've been through worse," he said. She nodded, understanding far deeper than words. As Thomas walked toward the door, she stepped aside with the quiet respect reserved for legends. Outside, the night air was cool. The sky stretched endlessly overhead, the stars faint but present, like memories distant but eternal. Thomas paused. He whispered into the night, "Another day. My friend. I kept someone else alive." Then he walked home slowly, the way old men do when the world finally remembers them. The moment you choose violence, it stops belonging to you, son. Put the gun down before you meet the man your friends used to fear. You should be scared of the man you'll become if you pull that trigger. As Thomas walked down the quiet street, porch lights flickered on one by one. Neighbors who had heard the commotion emerged, watching him pass. No one spoke. No one asked questions. They simply stood in a silent row, their faces soft with recognition, gratitude, and awe. The woman in uniform stood at the doorway of the convenience store, saluting him as he walked away. For the first time in many years, Thomas Hale felt seen, not as an old man, but as someone who had once carried a nation on his shoulders and had chosen, even now, to protect life instead of take it. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Some walk among us quietly, carrying battles no one sees. Thomas Hale reminds us that respect isn't about age. It's about understanding that every person you meet carries a story that could break your heart or change your life. So wherever you're watching from, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever met someone whose strength didn't show until the moment it mattered? Share your stories in the comments. And if this one moved you, consider subscribing for more stories that honor the silent heroes all around us. Thank you for watching.